Okay, so have you ever gotten that feeling like, when you're reading like some epic fantasy novel,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
dragons are like, swooping around and armies clashing, and you just think like, man, I wish I could just be in charge of all of this chaos.
Oh, for sure.
Or maybe you've like sat down with a board game rule book that's so dense that it feels like you're reading like a Tolkien appendix or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you're just like, I want that grand strategy feel,
Yeah.
but I don't want to have to like go to law school just to figure out how to play this thing.
Yeah.
Well, good news, everybody, because today we're diving into a game that brings all of that to your tabletop.
That's right.
That epic, sweeping, battle narrative without all the headache of a rule book that makes you want to pull your hair out.
It's fascinating to see how a game can really manage to capture both the scale and the drama of these legendary battles in a way that's actually pretty accessible.
Exactly. And the game we're diving into today is the Battle of Five Armies. And even if you only know Middle-earth from the Peter Jackson films, you'll still find a lot to love in this two-player game because it puts you right in the middle of the dramatic conclusion of The Hobbit.
Oh, wow.
From the book.
Okay.
By J.R.R. Tolkien. So we're talking about that final, desperate struggle for control of the Lonely Mountain, witnessed by Bilbo Baggins himself. Really a pivotal moment that sets the stage for, the even bigger conflicts to come.
And that's one of the cool things here, right?
Yeah.
That this battle, it seems very, localized,
Yeah.
but it was a crucial turning point for Middle-earth.
Oh, for sure.
And I think this game does a really good job at conveying that, that significance to the players.
Yeah, absolutely. So in one corner, we have the Shadow player, commanding a truly monstrous force.
Oh,
We're talking legions of orcs, and even the more fearsome great orcs. Hordes of goblins, packs of wargs, and those unsettling swarms of Grape Bats, all under the command of Bolg, son of Azog.
I mean, just from that description, it sounds like the Free Peoples are going to have their work cut out for them.
Oh, absolutely, and it's not going to be easy because they're facing off against the Free Peoples player, who commands a coalition of the Elves of Thrandu,
Okay.
the Dwarves of Dane Ironfoot, and the Men of the Lake, led by Bard the Bowman. And of course, uniting all of them, the strategic guidance of Gandalf the Grey.
So essentially you have a smaller but determined alliance fighting against a much larger force.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And to make things even more interesting, the game throws in some real wild cards that can change the course of the battle.
Yeah.
We're talking about the potential arrival of the Eagles.
Oh, wow.
Swooping in for the rescue.
Yeah.
The unpredictable appearance of Beorn in bear form.
That's right.
Gandalf wielding his magic. Hopefully he keeps that staff intact this time. And even little Bilbo might just play a role in the unfolding events.
Now, I'm curious, for people who might have played War of the Ring before, would they find some familiar ground here?
They might see some similarities.
Okay.
But this game really stands on its own 2 feet. It has its own strategic challenges and a really unique flavor. There are enough key differences that even seasoned War of the Ring veterans are going to need to pay attention.
So how does the game actually represent this clash of armies?
Yeah. Okay, so at the heart of the Battle of Five Armies is the action dice system.
Okay.
Each turn, both players roll a set of dice. And then you take turns using the results of those dice rolls to fuel your actions. Think of it as like you're a general giving orders.
Okay.
But what orders you can give depends on how those dice land. You might be planning this massive coordinated assault, but if you roll mostly muster results, you might end up bolstering your defenses instead.
Right.
And that unpredictability, I think, is a part of what makes the game so fun. You have to adapt your strategy on the fly.
So it's not just about following a preset plan.
Right.
It forces you to adapt and respond to the ever-changing circumstances of the battle.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have the fate track, which is a really cool way of bringing in those external interventions we talked about. The arrival of the Eagles and Beorn, it's not guaranteed.
Okay.
It's tied to the progress on this fate track. The track advances as the Shadow player draws fate tiles each turn. But here's where it gets interesting. The Free Peoples player can also influence the speed of that track.
Oh, wow.
So they might choose to activate more of their generals to gain an immediate advantage, but doing so actually lets the Shadow player draw more fate tiles, potentially bringing those allies into play sooner.
So there's this really interesting risk-reward element for the Free Peoples.
Oh, yeah.
Where they have to decide if they want to go for immediate power or if they want to try and maybe slow down the arrival of these allies that could help the Shadow.
It's like this agonizing choice every turn.
I can see that.
Now, So you can really get a sense of how the game flows. Let's walk through the turn structure. Each turn starts with a recovery phase. Everyone gets back their spent dice and draws some new cards. There are event cards that both sides can use and story cards that can introduce some narrative twists. Then the Free People's player activates up to 3 of their 5 generals. That's Bard, Thranduil, Gandalf, Dane, and the Lord of the Eagles. And they get leadership tokens based on how many they activate. And this is where that fate decision we just talked about comes into play.
Right.
Then the Shadow player gets to draw their fate tiles, which moves that fate marker along the track and might trigger some fate cards that actually benefit the Free Peoples. After that, the Shadow player distributes their earned leadership tokens and can put down any Grape Bats they want to use that turn. Then comes the big part of the turn, the action round. This is where both players alternate, spending their action dice to do all sorts of things, like moving their armies across the board, launching attacks, recruiting new units, playing those event and story cards we talked about. And at the end of the turn, you check to see if anyone has won. Everyone discards their unused leadership tokens. The Eagles go back to their eyrie, and those bats vanish until next turn.
So the game actually has this very well-defined structure that allows you to, as a player, follow the narrative of the battle.
Yeah, it makes it easy to track what's happening.
Okay.
Now let's get to the exciting part, combat. It's like a whole mini-game within the larger game, and things can get really tense. When armies clash, the fighting happens in rounds. First, both players secretly choose a card from their hand. Could be a unit card giving special abilities, an event card with an immediate combat effect, or even a card that helps you regroup after the fight.
Okay.
Then you roll a number of combat dice. How many depends on the strength of your army. You can roll up to 5. After that initial roll, if you have any leadership, either from an attached character or from those leadership tokens we talked about, you get to re-roll some of your missed hits.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then you apply damage to the enemy based on how many hits you got. If an army takes more damage than its starting strength, it starts losing units. At the end of the combat round, if the battle's still going, the attacker can choose to withdraw, or the defender might have to retreat, and sometimes with some pretty bad consequences.
So it sounds like the combat system combines both luck with the dice rolls and strategic decision-making with the use of cards.
Oh yeah, it's not just about rolling dice. Those cards can totally change the tide of battle, and there are these little details that add this extra layer of strategy.
Okay.
Like, for example, the number you need to roll on those combat dice to get a hit is usually a 5.
Okay.
But that can change depending on where the fight is happening. Like, say you're defending a fortified location, like Ravenhill.
Oh.
Well, then the attacker needs to roll a 6 to hit your units.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the same goes for if you're attacking across a ford or uphill on a mountain slope. That first round of combat, the attacker needs a higher number to hit.
So the terrain actually plays a big role in how combat plays out.
Absolutely. And then there's terrain superiority. Before a battle, you see which side has more units that are good in that particular type of terrain, and whoever has superiority gets to draw an extra event card. So it's not just about numbers, it's about having the right troops in the right place at the right time.
So there are all these nuances that really make each battle unique.
Yeah, and we can't forget about leadership tokens. When you attach those to an army, not only can you re-roll more of those combat dice, but they also help your armies move further. The Free Peoples earn their tokens based on which generals they activate. But the Shadow player gets a set number of leadership tokens and Grape Bats, and the total has to match the number of action dice they rolled. It's all about using those resources wisely.
So allocating those tokens becomes another strategic layer to the game.
Yeah, exactly. Now you might be wondering what kinds of actions you can actually perform with those action dice. Well, the icons on the dice tell you what you can do. The Free Peoples have character actions, which let them move their heroes around and maybe launch a quick attack. Then there are army actions to move their larger formations and launch bigger assaults. And of course, muster actions, which let you recruit new units. And then there are the event actions, which let you play those event and story cards we talked about, or even draw more cards. And they've even got a die face that combines muster and army. Gives them some flexibility. Oh, and they also have this really powerful Will of the West die face. It's like a wild card. They can use it for any Free People's action they need.
So essentially the Will of the West die gives the Free Peoples more flexibility in terms of how they want to respond to their dice rolls.
Yeah, for sure. Now the Shadow player has a similar set of dice. Character, army, muster, event actions. but instead of the Will of the West, they have the Lidless Eye.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, and that was all about their goblins. They can recruit more goblins, launch quick goblin attacks, and even move them super fast from their mountain strongholds to threaten the Free Peoples. And just like their opponents, they have a combo muster army die face.
So the Lidless Eye really emphasizes the overwhelming number of goblins the Shadow has at their disposal.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, we have the event and story cards. These are the things that let you really bend the rules a little bit, introduce some twists based on what's happening in the story. You play them by spending the right action die. And these cards can do all sorts of things, from making your units stronger to messing with your opponent's plans, or even triggering specific moments from the book.
So these event and story cards are really where the game's personality shines through.
Yeah, they add this layer of surprise.
Okay.
Now that we've gone through the basics, let's talk about some of the strategies that can win you the game.
Okay.
For the Shadow player, settlements are key.
Okay.
Not only do they give you victory points, but if you control 2 settlements in the same territory, you get an extra action die every turn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that extra action can make a huge difference in the long run. So the Free Peoples player, they need to be careful to contest those settlements. Now for the Free Peoples, they need to hold on to those fortified locations like Ravenhill. Those are really important for victory points, and they also make it harder for the Shadow to attack. So both sides have these key locations they need to fight for, and that creates these really interesting back and forth struggles throughout the game.
Right, so it's not just about brute force, it's about controlling those strategic locations.
Exactly. And remember how the Free Peoples player has to decide how many generals to activate?
Oh, yeah.
They need to balance that immediate advantage with the risk of giving the Shadow player more fate tiles. That decision can really make or break the game.
So what are some of the signs that a Free Peoples player might be playing too aggressively early on?
Well, if they activate all 3 generals early in the game, when the fate track is still low, that might be a sign they're going for a quick victory.
Right.
But if they're being more careful and only activating 1 or 2, even when they're under pressure, that might mean they're trying to manage the fate track. Exactly. It's all about reading your opponent. Now let's talk about some of those unique units and characters that can really turn the tide of battle. The Eagles are really interesting.
Okay.
You can't just muster them like regular units.
Okay.
They come in through specific event cards or by using the Lord of the Eagles special ability. They start in their eyrie up in the mountains, and when they're called down, they can swoop in and attack multiple shadow armies in the same territory. But the catch is, after you move them, you need to spend a muster die to actually activate their attack. So you can't just rely on them showing up. You need the right dice, too.
So they represent this powerful but limited resource.
Exactly. Now, another game changer is Beorn.
Yeah, Beorn is interesting.
Oh, he is. He comes into play through a fate card, and to move him, you need to spend either a Will of the West die or a character die, which also costs him one of his Wrath tokens.
Okay.
And in combat, he is strong. He rolls 4 combat dice and has a really good hit rate. He can also use those Wrath tokens to take damage, so he's tough.
Yeah, he's not going down easily.
Right. But here's the really crazy part. If Beorn comes into play, and the Shadow player has less than 6 victory points, the Free Peoples win instantly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the Shadow player really has to focus on getting those early victory points, or Beorn could just show up and ruin their day.
So he adds this element of surprise that the Shadow player always has to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. And then the Shadow has some pretty cool units too, like the Grape Bats.
Okay, how do they work?
Each turn, the Shadow player gets to decide where to put those bats. And once they're down, the Shadow player can spend a muster die to activate their Bat Cloud ability. That lets them move a Shadow army that's in the same territory as the bat, and they remove the bat to do it. It gives them a lot of flexibility in their movement.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then they've got this really creepy combat ability too.
Okay.
If a Shadow army with Grape Bats deals at least 1 damage in a round, the Shadow player can get rid of one of the bats to do an extra point of damage to their enemy.
So they're not just annoying, they can actually be quite dangerous.
Yeah, they can really pack a punch. And of course, we can't forget about Bolg.
Oh yeah, the big bad himself.
Yeah, he's got these bodyguard tokens that can negate all damage done to his army in a single round.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's tough to take down. And if the Free Peoples manage to kill Bolg, they win the game immediately.
Really?
Yeah, so he's a high-value target, but attacking him is really risky.
So it becomes a matter of Can you afford to ignore him, or do you have to commit all your resources to taking him down?
Exactly. It's all about those tough choices. And you can just imagine all the crazy moments this game can create, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like those desperate last stands at Ravenhill, the Eagles swooping in at the last second, Beorn just barreling through the enemy lines to secure an early victory.
It sounds like a very cinematic game.
It is. It's full of narrative tension. Now, for some of those hot takes, those little funny things you notice while you're playing, I always get a kick out of how a shadow attack that looks unstoppable can completely fall apart because of bad dice rolls.
Oh yeah, I've seen that happen.
You think you've got the perfect plan, you've got all these armies moving in for the kill, and then nothing but misses.
It really shows how even the best plan can be undone by a little bit of bad luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the Free People's player, there should be a rule that whenever the Eagles arrive, you have to shout, "The Eagles are coming!"
That would be awesome.
Right, in your best Gandalf voice.
Though I'm not sure how well that would go over with everyone.
Probably not. But it would be fun. Another thing that's interesting is how you can only have 5 army units in most regions of the board.
Oh, right.
You can't just create these massive armies and overwhelm your opponent.
Makes you think more strategically about your troop movements.
Yeah, for sure. And I always feel for the shadow player when they're drawing those fate tiles. It's such a gamble.
Yeah.
Do they draw more and risk moving that fate marker too fast?
Right.
Or do they play it safe and maybe miss out on some key events? It's a nail-biter every time.
It adds this element of tension to the game that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
So overall, if you're a fan of Tolkien's world and you love those strategic 2-player games with a lot of depth, I think the Battle of 5 Armies is definitely worth checking out.
I would agree. It really captures that feeling of epic conflict in a way that's both exciting and easy to learn.
Yeah, and if you like games like this, you should definitely check out War of the Ring, which inspired a lot of the mechanics in this game.
Absolutely. And as a final thought for our listeners, I would ask, which character or event from the game do you think has the biggest impact on the battle?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Think about those pivotal moments and maybe go back and read The Hobbit and see how the designers managed to bring those moments to life on the tabletop.
I think that's a great place to end our deep dive.
As always, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this was a fun one.
The mountain looms where treasures shine. A dragon's fall sparks war divine. Elves march swift, with bows of gold. Dwarves in armor, brave and bold. The eagles soar, the sky's ablaze. Men with courage join the fray. Orcs and wolves in shadows creep. A clash of fates where none shall sleep. The battle of 5 armies calls. On fields of war where kingdoms fall. Who will stand and who will kneel when blades and fate carve out the deal? The elven king with starlit spear, his warriors glide through chaos near. The dwarven lord with hammer raised, the clash of stone, his fury blazed. A trumpet sounds, the frost will bite. Snow